Hi guys, my name is Sandra Ivanchiva and I'm going to talk about symbolic speech and the way that it is talked about in the First Amendment. A lot of the cases that you see throughout the course of American history have had to do with flag burning and flag desecration. Um, Flags are typically burned symbolically, often in protest of the policies of the government, both within the country and abroad. Um, Typically, when you think of flag burning, you think of burning the flag as an act of protest, be that war or a social issue, or what have you. But the U.S. Flag Code states that the flag should be destroyed in a dignified way, like burning when it's no longer, display ready, whether it's torn, faded, things of that sort. So there are dignified ways of burning the flag, which need to be noted as well. So the two most famous cases having to do with flag burning were Texas versus Johnson, which happened in 1989, and then U.S. versus Eichmann, which happened in 1990. So the Texas versus Johnson case had to do with a guy named Gregory Johnson, who was a member of the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade. He participated in a political demonstration that happened at the Republican National Convention in Dallas in 1984, which was in protest of Reagan's administration. There was a march at the time, people marching, destroying property, throwing all sorts of things everywhere. He was sent to trial and at first convicted, and then once he appealed that charge, it did go up to the Supreme Court, and there was a 5-4 Supreme Court decision on the case. So this decision invalidated prohibitions on the desecration of the American flag, and stated that the defendant Johnson's act was protected speech. And then also in 1989, the Flag Protection Act happened, which tried to circumvent this ruling and prohibited the mistreatment of the flag without regard to any message being conveyed. But moments after this law took effect, flags were burned at a demonstration outside of the Capitol in protest. So then we turn to U.S. versus Eichmann, which happened in 1990. Sean Eichmann was involved in this flag burning that occurred outside of Capitol Hill that Johnson was also involved in. He was a member of the coalition opposed to the censorship in the arts, and once again, in a 5-4 decision, the court held that the federal government, like the states, are not allowed to prosecute a person for burning the American flag, since it does go against the symbolic speech granted to citizens in the First Amendment. Flag burning is expressive conduct and enjoys the First Amendment's full protection. The destruction or disfigurement of a symbol's physical manifestation doesn't diminish or affect the symbol itself. So the First Amendment deemed that it was unconstitutional for a government, be that federal, state, or municipal government, to prohibit the desecration of a flag because of its status as symbolic speech. Content-neutral restrictions can be imposed, however, that regulate the time, place, and manner of such expression. But besides those types of restrictions, that type of symbolic speech cannot be prohibited. Flags burned at someone else's property, however, can be charged as petty larceny or destruction of private property, as was the case in Johnson's trial, since Johnson did steal the flag from a Texas bank's flagpole. So there have been several proposed flag desecration amendments to the Constitution that would allow Congress to enact laws to prohibit flag desecration. In 1991, for example, Douglas Applegate of Ohio, Robert Domen of California, John Hammerschmidt of Arkansas, Clarence Miller of Ohio, and Floyd Spencer of South Carolina all proposed such amendments to the Constitution. This was followed in the coming years by Andrew Jacobs Jr., Ron Paul, John Murda, David Vitter, Spencer Bachus, all in various states in various years ranging from 1995 to 2013. Then you have people that have repeatedly proposed the implementation of such amendments. You have people like Joseph McDade, who has proposed it in 1989, 1995, and 1996. Bill Emerson of Missouri, who's proposed it in 91, 93, and 95. You have Joanne Emerson from Missouri, who has proposed it every other year from 1997 to 2013. And then Orrin Hatch from Utah, who's proposed it 8 times since his initial proposal in 1995. Of course, the need for this regulation of the flag most notoriously began in 1962 when the Union Army occupied New Orleans in the American Civil War. During this time, Benjamin Franklin Butler, who was the military governor at the time, sentenced William Mumford to death as punishment for the removal of a U.S. flag. The U.S. does have a long history, as I stated before, of using the flag as a means of protest. During the Vietnam War, American flags were burned as a demonstration of opposition to the war. So in the original Texas versus Johnson decision, the Flag Protection Act was passed, which served to protect the American flag from any type of mutilation, defacing, burning, trampling, etc., any sort of defacement at all. This was struck down by U.S. versus Eichmann. So in considering flag burning and desecration, it should also be noted that there are often parallels that are made between this and other acts, such as flying an American flag upside down. Doing this, though, isn't always a political protest and has frequently been viewed as a distress signal. So by extension, this distress signal can be used as a means of explaining distress in civil and political areas or other areas in which a citizen may feel threatened. And then taking into account the Confederate flag, this is another symbolic item that has been burned in protest. In 2000, for example, the Jewish Defense League burned Confederate flags in addition to Nazi flags as a means of protesting attempted arson on a synagogue. Public criticism, of course, goes hand in hand with any talk of flag desecration or flag burning. It has throughout the course of history. Everyone has their own opinions on what they think is just or unjust. Many see flag burning as being an ineffective means of protest. They say that it would be more effective to work with the police or other authorities rather than to do something drastic that could inflame a situation, no pun intended. In 5 U.S. states, however, which are Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina, the Confederate flag is given the same protection as the American flag. And flag burning and the flag itself as a means of protest do continue to be issues that we see even in today's day and age, with the recent incident of Colin Kaepernick, who chose to kneel during the national anthem. There was outrage throughout the country, and there were many people that chose to support him. This is a means of protesting and using the American flag to do it, so it is relevant to symbolic speech as protected by the First Amendment. And then we have recently, in the past week or so, President-elect Trump has advocated for revoking citizenship for those that burn the flag, or even choosing to send them to jail, which is interesting because 2 years ago, Trump said that flag burning is 100% right as a form of freedom of expression. So every day we continue to see newscasts and articles detailing both sides of the argument. However, while it is a contested issue in the public eye, it is important to remember that constitutionally speaking, flag burning and desecration, as well as any other act involving protest and the American flag, is constitutionally protected. Yes, there are exceptions to this, like the content-neutral restrictions that I mentioned earlier, but in the face of growing controversy and even a soon-to-be president's insistence that those that burn the flag should be prosecuted, flag burning is a legal form of symbolic speech which must be respected whether you agree with it or not.